Yeah, that's how you beat Leon. The blueprint was kind of written in a lot of his fights, and I just did it a lot better than I think anybody else has been able to do it. Leon's a very technical fighter, but when you make it a real hard fight, he tends to break, and I could see he was breaking, and I knew he broke once he shot on me because that's the last place he would want to be is on the ground with me. So once I knew he wanted to grapple with me, I knew it was going to be over soon.
All right, so Leon Edwards just got absolutely dog-walked by Sean Brady this past weekend, and seeing as this is fresh off of his previous loss to Bilal Muhammad, I think it's pretty safe to say that the jig is up. And although I did predict Sean to get the win in this fight, I really did not think that he was going to make Leon look as utterly helpless as he did. And after these last two performances, I think it's safe to say that the idea that Leon was this elite, untouchable welterweight who was going to reign over the division for years has completely fallen apart. And now, with his weaknesses fully exposed, it's clear that his time at the top was more illusion than reality. I'll be the first one to admit that after his title fights with Usman and Covington, he had me convinced that he was a top-tier striker that developed S-tier takedown defense, but man, oh man, was that far from the truth. And yeah, in this video, I'll be talking about all this and more. So if Bilal Muhammad put the nail in Leon's coffin, then Sean Brady put him 6 feet under. This was supposed to be the fight where Leon made adjustments, where he proved that he had worked on his wrestling defense, and where he could show that he was still a top-tier welterweight. Instead, Brady took the exact same strategy as Bilal and somehow made it look even easier. Brady's relentless takedown attempts completely overwhelmed Leon, and once again, we saw that Leon simply has no answers for when a fighter commits to dragging him down to the mat. Every single round, Brady was able to impose his wrestling, and even when Leon managed to stuff a takedown or two, it was only a matter of time before he was on his back again. And to put it bluntly, I totally agree with the sentiment that Leon quit on himself in his last 2 fights. I'm not gonna judge him for it all that much because he's accomplished more than I ever will, but let's just call a spade here, guys. When his opponents are able to drag him into deep water, you can literally see the look on Leon's face when he decides that there's no hope in salvaging a win. It happened in the very first fight with Kamaru, and the photos that have come out from his losses to Bilal and Sean have become memes at this point. Like, the complete and utter lack of urgency that Leon fights with is baffling, and in the past he's been able to get away with it because he's mostly fought strikers when he was coming up in the division. But to watch this guy get repeatedly backed up and bullied on the ground only to start the next round with his back up against the cage is insane. I understand that Leon prides himself in being a super technical, highly cerebral sort of fighter who's always trying to think 2 steps ahead of his opponent, but I think that there's a huge difference between fighting technically and fighting passively. And in the case of the fight this past weekend, Brady shut down whatever technical advantages Leon may have had because he made the fight gritty and dirty. He made the fight a fight, and Leon had no answers for it, and furthermore, he doesn't have any excuses to use this time around. After the Bilal fight, he complained about fighting early in the morning, but this time around, that's not a card that he can pull. He got dominated under favorable circumstances, and in Brady's own words, Leon was super salty after the fight.
Yeah, Leon was super salty afterwards, so I kind of understand what Bilal's been talking about. So yeah, I think Leon was too focused on Bilal all week and not me, and it was the worst thing that ever happened to him. Yeah, I think everyone thought he was. Every interview I did, it had his name in there. It had Leon's name and Bilal's name, and not mine. So me and my team took that as he's not focused on me, and clearly he wasn't. Takedowns came easy, and submission came even easier.
Okay, that takedown that Leon went for in round 3 was truly one of the dumbest things I've seen a UFC fighter do in a while. Everybody watching knew that that was a low fight IQ moment, and even Paul Felder commented on how awful of a decision it was, and I can't help but wonder if that was Edwards looking for a way out of the fight. Sure, maybe in the moment Leon really did think that he would catch Sean with an unexpected takedown, but honestly, there's a part of me that wonders if Leon was inviting Brady back to the ground in order to finish him. It was just such an unbelievably dumb thing for Edwards to do that forces me to think that there were ulterior motives behind it.
Leon likes to be like he's like a pretty striker. He likes to have his range and have things go on his terms. And once they start going off his terms, he does dumb shit like shoot on me, and then it goes downhill from there.
And here's the thing, guys. Brady is not Habib or Islam. He isn't this once-in-a-generation sort of grappler. He's just a strong technical wrestler who knows how to pressure his opponents, and that was more than enough to completely neutralize Leon's game. People spent years talking about how Leon's striking was elite, but what good is elite striking when you're spending 75% of the fight on your back? What good is being a counter striker when you're constantly stuck against the cage, defending takedown attempts with no real success? By the end of the fight, it wasn't just a loss, it was a complete dismantling. Brady exposed Leon in the same way that Bilal did, and the fact that it's happened in back-to-back fights means that this isn't just some isolated weakness. This is who Leon Edwards is as a fighter. If you can take him down, you can dominate him. If you pressure him, he will break. Edwards' biggest problem is that he always looks completely clueless when he's taken off of his feet. He doesn't have the explosive scrambles of someone like Usman, he doesn't have the jiu-jitsu of someone like Burns, and he doesn't have the ability ability to create openings to get back to his feet quickly. Once Brady and Bilal both got him down, they kept him down, and it was just a rinse and repeat cycle from that point on. The same people who were calling him the best welterweight in the world after he knocked out Usman are now being forced to reckon with the fact that he has no answer for a strong grappling heavy approach. The idea that he was a dominant champion fell apart in real time, and this wasn't some freak occurrence or one bad night. This is now the blueprint for how to beat him, and I guarantee you that every single one of Leon's future opponents are going to impose a similar game plan to the ones that Sean and Bilal brought in. You know what this reminds me of actually? Anthony Pettis. When Pettis first entered the UFC after the WEC got bought out, people were excited to see his striking style against the best fighters in the world. But lo and behold, in his very first UFC fight, he was repeatedly pushed backward and taken down by Clay Guida, who frankly was never considered championship material. Of course, Pettis would go on a good winning streak where he captured the UFC belt and even defended it, but then in his second title defense, he was taken down and dominated in a lopsided performance against RDA, who clearly seemed to take inspiration from Guida's playbook. Then in Anthony's next fight, he lost a decision to Eddie Alvarez, who, surprise surprise, repeatedly took him down because it became obvious to the world that Pettis lacked high-level takedown defense. This is a nearly one-to-one comparison to Leon's UFC career up to now. In Leon's UFC debut, he was taken down by Claudio Silva, and then just a couple of fights later, he was wrestle-fucked by Kamaru Usman. Then Leon goes unbeaten for a while, where he wins the welterweight title along the way. He defends his title twice until Bilal Muhammad comes along and takes his lunch money, and then in his very next fight, he gets steamrolled by Brady, who just copied and pasted the tried and true game plan that's been proven to beat Leon Edwards. You know, it's funny, for years the narrative around Leon was that he was an elite, well-rounded fighter who just didn't get the respect that he deserved. People talked about his striking as if he was some sort of generational talent, they hyped up his win streak like he was running through killers, and they acted like he was being unfairly overlooked. But in reality, Leon's entire reputation was built on a handful of favorable matchups. And let's be real here, the only reason Leon became champion in the first place was because of that head kick against Kamaru Usman. Don't get me wrong, it was a great moment, one of the most iconic knockouts in UFC history. But let's not pretend like Leon was dominating the fight before the knockout. In fact, he was getting absolutely outclassed. Usman was controlling him, out-wrestling him, and was cruising to an easy decision win before he got caught. That is not the mark of an elite fighter, it's the mark of a guy who landed one perfect shot at the perfect time. In hindsight, if Kamaru didn't get overconfident in the final minute of the fight and just stuck to the game plan of backing Leon up and taking him down, we'd probably would have never seen Edwards fight for a title ever again, because he probably would have gotten matched up against Bilal, or who knows, maybe even Hamzat, and he would have been beaten by both of them. But we live in the timeline where Leon pulls off the head kick and wins the belt, and I'm not gonna say it's a fluky win. I will say though that the better fighter lost that fight. And even in the third Usman fight where Leon clearly won, I wouldn't say that there aren't any asterisks over this win either. Usman looked noticeably slower, less explosive, and like a fighter who had already peaked. Now, of course, this isn't necessarily Leon's fault that he fought an over-the-hill version of Usman, but the fact of the matter is he just did. Even in Leon's next fight against Colby's just also not the same fighter that he used to be, much in the same vein as Usman. And like I said earlier, after these set of title wins, I was actually convinced that Edwards was one of the top pound-for-pound fighters in the promotion, but looking back at it, the reality of those fights are starting to become a bit more obvious to me. Both Usman and Covington were older than Leon and had slowed down massively comparative to their respective primes, and frankly, I feel like there were probably a lot of other welterweights that would have made it past them at that time, not just Edwards. And now that Leon's had to face hungry, well-rounded contenders, we've seen exactly why he was never the elite fighter that people made him out to be. Yeah, I don't know, at this point the mystique of Leon Edwards is completely gone. He's not a dominant champion, he's not an all-time great, and he's not even the best fighter in his division. If anything, he's the most vulnerable former champion possibly in the UFC, and now that the game plan to beat him is out there, he's going to struggle against every top-level grappler at welterweight. And wanna know the worst part? Leon doesn't seem to have the ability to fix the holes in his game. He's not some young prospect who can drastically improve upon his takedown defense. He is a veteran who has been fighting the same way for years, and at this point he is who he is. Like, I really doubt that Edwards and his team have the capacity to start patching up these glaring deficits in his game at this stage in his career. So what does Leon do now? Does he try to reinvent himself knowing that it's probably too late for that? Does he continue taking fights against guys who will just keep exposing his weaknesses? Or does he accept the fact that his time at the top was short-lived and that he was never actually the elite fighter that people made him out to be? The truth is, Leon Edwards fooled the world, myself included. He made people believe he was a dominant champion with an elite all-around skill set, when in reality, he was just a guy who had one great moment. Now that moment is long gone, and all that's left is a fighter who's been completely exposed and has no clear path forward. Anyways, that's the video for today. Definitely let me know what you think about Leon. Is he a fraud that finally got exposed, or do you think he can bounce back from this? As always, if you like the video, then like the video, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. I appreciate you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.
I know the media were asking Leon about Bilal. What did you make of it? now, do you feel that Leon may have been overlooking you and more thinking about getting revenge himself?
Yeah, I think he was too worried about Bilal. He was too worried about how tall I am. He was too worried about a bunch of other things that didn't matter. And yeah, it showed tonight. He got smoked. So he should have been more focused on this fight.